Hi, I'm Mr. Williamson. In this video, we're going to talk about the themes of biology. Themes in biology are subjects or ideas that can be found across the subject of biology. Most subjects have themes, English and history and such, have themes that you can unify the class or the ideas in those subjects. In this video, we're going to talk about the 8 themes of biology, and I'll go into a little detail in each one of them. I would suggest you taking notes, pausing the video when you need to, go back if you don't understand something or didn't understand what I said, and of course at the end or when it's over, feel free to come to see me in class and ask questions. So here we go. The themes are the process of science. It's basically just how did we discover what we discover? How do we know what we know in biology? And we'll be talking about that throughout the year. How did we learn something, but how did we learn it? The levels of organization. There's a tie-in between all the levels of organization, and I'll discuss that. Unity and diversity. Things are all the same, but at the same time, everything's different. We're going to learn that structure is related to function. The structure of an organism or part of an organism is related to what it does. Adaptation and evolution. Things adapt to an environment, and that causes them to evolve. The continuity of life. Those adaptations are passed down to their parents. Homeostasis. Things stay the same and for their survival. And all life forms interconnected. What affects one life form affects a lot more. It's not just one. So let's take a look at each one of them in one at a time. First of all, the process of science is basically the scientific method. The scientific method is a process of 7 steps that we will be discussing in class or on a video. It's a systematic, as it says, it's a systematic method of answering questions and solving problems. You actually probably already use this. You have a problem maybe with a video game or cooking, and you want to improve your performance or your whatever you're cooking. And so you examine it, you look at the problem, you do some research, what would make it better, what might work better in the video game, and then you experiment, you try it, and if it works, then great, your idea was correct. If it doesn't, then you try again. And that's pretty much the scientific method. And like I said, we will go over that much more detail later on in class and on a video. The levels of organization. The levels of organization basically refer to from the molecular, almost definitely actually an atomic level to all the way up to the environment, the ecosystem, the biosphere. And we can go up and down on those levels and look at similarities and contrast and compare different things. For instance, we have here the molecule, which we can actually break down into atoms, and we can break those down into protons and neutrons and electrons, and we can actually get down that even farther if we wanted to get into quantum physics or something like that. And that's not what this class is about, but we can go from atoms to molecules, and then we take these molecules and this looks like adenosine triphosphate. I don't know what it is. It says right there. I should have read that. This is adenosine triphosphate, which is a molecule that the cells use for energy. And they're produced in this organelle, the mitochondria. The mitochondria is the organelle that produces the ATP from sugar. But it's also made of a lot of other molecules. It's made of proteins and carbohydrates, and fats, and those are all molecules that we find inside the organelle, the mitochondria, and they all come from this molecule. So we can say that the molecules are made of atoms. The organelles are made of molecules. And then we go to the next step, and we can say that those organelles actually make up the cell. So we have not just the mitochondria, but you also have the nucleus and the Golgi body and the endoplasmic reticulum, and ribosomes, and et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole bunch more. And all those things make up the cell, but all those things are made out of proteins, which are all, or other organic molecules, which are made of molecules, which are made of atoms. We can take a whole bunch of these cells, put them together, and we end up with a tissue. A tissue is a group of cells, similar cells, that all made of the same kind. So a ganglion is basically an area of your body, or in this case, it's going to be a different organism, that are made of the same cells. So you can have tissue that's muscle tissue, or connective tissue, or cardiac tissue, or whatever, and it's made up of the same kind of cell. So all the kind of cells make up this tissue. We take a whole bunch of different tissues and we make up an organ. In this case, the brain of the fish. But it's all made of nerve tissue and other things. There's connective tissue and blood tissues and things like that. And then we can take a whole bunch of those organs, like the digestive system, the circulatory system, the skeletal system, the muscular system, et cetera, and take all the systems and put them together, and what we end up with is the entire organism. We end up with a living thing based on all those systems. And so taking it backwards again, looking at the levels, you have the organism, which is one living thing, which is made out of all these different organs. And the organs are basically groups of different kinds of tissue that perform one function. Like the digestive system, there are a bunch of tissues that perform digestion for the fish. Those organs are made out of different tissues, which are different types of cells, we go back into the organelles, which are back to the molecules, back to the atom. So, the levels of diversity. And then we end up with going from that organism down to the organism, down to the population, which is a group of the same organism. So this one fish is an individual, an organism. You have a bunch of those kind of fish, and you have a population. You take a whole bunch of different populations, for instance, the fish, the coral, this is probably looks like an arthropod, some kind of sea anemone, and we end up with a community. All right, and that would make up maybe a bunch of different communities, makes up the biosphere, which is pretty much the entire planet. So you have like the ocean community, the reef community, forest community, desert community, et cetera, et cetera. But the bottom line is that they're different levels. The next one is unity and diversity. As different as every organism seems, each one is related by cellular function. So you look at a plant and say, you are not a plant. They don't seem related. And yet at the cellular level, they are. We all have cells. They all have nucleuses. They all produce proteins. And here you can see the 6 different kingdoms. We talk about 5 of them. We don't talk too much about this one, but it still applies. Plants, multicellular, eukaryotic, which means that they are cells that have membrane-bound organelles. They have a nucleus, they have mitochondria, they have endoplasmic reticulum, et cetera, et cetera. Well, they're related to animals. They also have they're multicellular and they're eukaryotic, meaning that they have nucleus and endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi bodies and things like that. And the fungus is also multicellular and eukaryotic. What's the difference? It's what they do. Protista, eukaryotic, and they can be both multicellular, but the cells are the same. Even though they're completely different organisms, they're the same. And bacteria basically, are prokaryotic, meaning that they have very simple cells. It's a cell that does not have any membrane-bound organelles. They have very simple. They have a cell membrane. They have ribosomes. They have usually some DNA or RNA. And that's it. There's a very simple. Whereas these cells up here, these 4 right here, the ones that we actually talk most about in biology, are eukaryotic. That's probably the one you need to know. You need to know what the difference between eukaryotic and prokaryotic is. So off this, I would make sure that I am aware of what eukaryotic, which is complex cells. They have membrane-bound organelles, nucleus, an endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondria, Golgi bodies, vacuoles, or whatever, and the difference between eukaryotic and prokaryotic. And prokaryotic cells are cells that are related to, are very simple. They have a cell membrane, they have a cytoplasm, they have no membrane-bound organelles. They probably have ribosomes, They have, like I said, DNA or RNA, but they're not very complex. So again, you need to know the difference of that. And if you don't understand, I would recommend looking it up in your book. But that was the difference of we're all the same. All the cells are the same in both plants and animals. They have all the same cells that do the same functions, and their organelles do the same functions, but completely different organisms. Structure is related to function. The structure of an organism is clearly related to the function of that organism. For example, you have here a plant where you can see the leaf is a flat, broad structure, and it's flat and broad so that it can absorb more of the sunlight that's being for photosynthesis, and it allows that leaf to absorb as much sunlight as possible because of the increased surface area. The stem is the structure of the stem. If we looked at the stem, it would be very, very dense or rigid, and it's to support those leaves and hold them up to the light. Meanwhile, down here we have the roots, which support the plant and hold it in place and absorb water. And the structure, actually, the root has, you can just kind of see it right there, little root hairs that, and there's some more down here, that increase the surface area for the absorption of water. The more surface area you have, the more absorption you can get, both up in light up here and in water down here. So again, structure is related to function, or the other way around, function might be related to structure. Adaptation and evolution. Living organisms are well suited for where they live, usually, if it's in a natural setting. I say that because you will have plants in your backyard that are not from our area, but they look good, and that's why we put them there. But they're probably not well adapted to our environment. That's why we have to water some of them more than others and things like that. But adaptation and evolution, we're basically looking at adaptations to environments. We live in the Southern California, we live in a desert. And so the plants and organisms that live in are native to our area are desert dwellers. They survive well without a lot of water, and they survive with higher temperatures maybe. Here's an example of a simple shark. The adaptation, you can see the shape of the shark is called fusiform, and it's very hydrodynamic. It goes through the water well. The curve of the fin back here, it allows the fish to be propelled through the water well. The fin is for stability, along with these fins, and the dorsal fin and the pectoral fins are well developed for stability and steering. The gills are designed and have evolved to take oxygen out of the water, and that's how they've adapted. The shark is an animal that is well adapted to its environment. It survives in the ocean and thrives in it because that's where it's adapted, and as a result, we have evolution. The continuity of life. Most populations of organisms are stable. What does that mean? That means that they are designed to live or have evolved to live where they are. For instance, I live against a state park, and there's a lot of lizards. Those lizards have evolved to live in that area. And the stability comes from the organisms resembling their parents. If you have the parents who have survived, and they survived well enough to reproduce, and they have the offspring, which are very similar to their parents. They look the same. If you have a lizard here, and this is a terrible drawing of a lizard, but it's a lizard, its offsprings are going to look the same as the parent, because that's what survived in the past. And that's a continuity of life. It's a passing on of those adaptations and the things that allowed the parents to survive, because the environment doesn't change a lot, then the offspring would continue to stay pretty much the same. And here's another example. This is taken off of Laguna Beach. It's a sheephead, and you can see where, and I can tell you that the sheephead that we have in Southern California are all pretty much the same. They have the same teeth. Why? Because that's what has allowed the organisms to survive. They have the same color pattern because that's what allows the organism to survive in this environment. And they all pretty much have the same size when they reach maturity because that's that allowed them to survive in the environment. You can also see in the background the kelp, which is all have these pneumatocysts, the bladders that have them float. They have the large blades that allow for photosynthesis. And they're all similar because their parents were similar, and therefore they were able to survive and then pass those traits on and adaptations on to their offspring. Homeostasis is the staying the same. And basically all organisms have homeostasis. The best example that you probably have experienced is one that regulates temperature. Your temperature is regulated by your body, so that when you exercise, you start to heat up, and as the temperature goes up, you begin to sweat. Okay, well, that sweating is a cause you to cool down. The moisture on your skin, as it evaporates, cools you down. The blood flows up to the surface of the skin and cools down, and then it takes it back to the core of the body and allows you to cool your body down. We are endotherms. Our temperature is the same always, unless something extraordinary happens. It's 98.6. 98.6 is, we consider, an average temperature. If you exercise, his is probably up. It might be as high as 100 because he's exercising, but his body's working to keep it down through the sweating process and things like that. On the other hand, an ectoderm, like this snake, its temperature is the same as the outside. So if it's 80 degrees outside, then the snake is also 80 degrees. If it's 100 degrees outside, then the snake is also 100 degrees. That's why snakes regulate their temperature not by sweating, or lizards, or actually reptiles, don't regulate their temperature by sweating or shivering, which is what we do. We get cold, we shiver. They have to regulate their temperature by either being in the sun and soaking up the heat to warm themselves up, or getting in the shade or underground to cool themselves down. But the bottom line is they have to maintain their body temperature. Another example is your urinary system. If you drink excessive amounts of water, you have to urinate more. If you don't drink a lot of water and don't hydrate yourself properly, your urine becomes more concentrated. And then finally, life forms are all interconnected. All these look kind of like they shouldn't be related, but the plant needs to, or the rabbit needs to eat the plant to survive. All right, the lion eats the rabbit to survive, and the lion, when it dies or it goes to the restroom, defecates, is supplying nutrients to the plants. And it's a process where we're all interconnected. Everything is interconnected, and we also have other organisms that may be feeding on the rabbit. That might be the rabbit might be eating a different kind of plant, and likewise, we might have some kind of other animal like a coyote. Not sure why the coyote and the lion are in the same place, but they might be. A coyote that eats the rabbit, and etc. It's all life forms are interconnected. And to top it off, somewhere in here, man fits, because we have a huge impact on our environment. So when we change the environment, we change all of these. Our effect on all of these is huge. So, and it's one of the things that we kind of need to be aware of as we go through our lives is our effect on nature and other organisms. So it's just all life forms are interconnected. And finally, that's the 8 themes of biology. And throughout the class, I'll be talking about those, not really talking about this is a theme of biology, but mentioning them in kind of the ways I just did. This is connected to this. You can see this flow of energy and things like that. So it's kind of keep an eye on those as we go through the year. Again, if you have any questions, please come to me during class time and ask me, and I'll be glad to answer it. If you're doing this through Edpuzzle, there will be a question at the end asking you for what you didn't understand, and I'll try to make sure I cover the majority of those in class. Feel free to go back over the video, take a look at the chapters in the unit and the book. Like I said, but most importantly, make sure you ask me questions as we go through class. Hope you understood, and have a good day.